Tomorrow's People, the podcast brought to you by Personio and me, Bertie Tonks. Everything starts with people. And the people on this podcast are pioneering thinkers like 2023's HR Most Influential Practitioner, Bertie Tonks. His work in HR across a number of disciplines has emerged into literally mapping the future. Bertie has some experimental and radical views on what lies ahead for tomorrow's people. Welcome to Tomorrow's People podcast, Bertie Tonks.
Hey, how you doing, Perry? Nice to see you, buddy.
You too, my friend, you too. And I'll start by saying congratulations on being the number one most influential HR practitioner for 2023. Well played.
Thank you. I must admit, it still feels quite unreal, but yeah, a hell of an honour, I have to say.
Oh, good. And, we'll unpack some of the reasons that's happened and your take on the world from the people profession and just work more generally and so on. But I'm really interested in kind of what's occupying you at the moment. What's really hot for you in terms of the work you're doing?
Yeah, well, I think some of it is actually around how we can build a purpose-driven, high-performing culture. And particularly the high-performing piece is translating to something quite interesting for us at the moment. Even some of the kind of fundamental blocks of organisation culture that perhaps I myself have perhaps even ignored in the past is starting to come through as being really, really important. Org design. So how can we process through organisation development? What I find is actually that the challenge is less about where I see the opportunities to evolve, to simplify, to reduce the complexity, to drive value to our customers and clients, but more so around how can I get our leadership teams on board with the fact that this is the right thing to do. Everyone has a view. The good thing about HR is everybody has a view about people and culture.
Well, that's so true. And I mean, it's complex by nature. The definitions are many and, it still feels a bit enigmatic and elusive and all those kinds of things. But I guess I'm really interested in that sort of leader interplay and intersection and so on. So, anything you're seeing that is really igniting leaders and puzzling them and giving them almost like a sense of like challenge and like I don't know what to do here. I mean, it must be a bit of all of that.
Yeah, well, I mean, we see it in HR terms. Everywhere you read, every screen you look at, there's something screaming out at us saying the world is changing, the world of business, consumers, customers, and for our people. And I do think it's becoming a bit overwhelming. I think it's becoming overwhelming a little bit for the HR profession, Perry. Not least to say for our managers and leaders. I think it's like we're in rabbit in headlights time.
Yeah.
Because even before the last few years, we know that there was a bit of a struggle. And I describe now what we have as not we've got Collinson's a fantastic business, but I think more generally across business enterprise, I'm seeing a real what I describe as a leadership deficit, and that's no slight at all on our leadership. It's things have changed so much, and I think people are really struggling to get to grips with what the hell does that actually mean for me.
Yeah, and I think you're right. In the past, what we've looked at is either the failings of leadership, where you can point to them and go, that's on you, that's not right. And we do see a few of those instances, don't we, where they're still doing silly things and saying silly things. But this is a different game, isn't it? This is like, I don't even know what to expect of you as a leader anymore, let alone you tell me what you think it is. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And, we don't get me wrong, there's some incredible leaders out there, and we've got many of them actually working within our own business at Collinson, doing a fantastic job, but I think certainly in relation to people and culture specifically, and how we and again I keep using the term, but how we evolve our purpose-driven, high-performing culture. There are some fundamental shifts that underpin that we've got to take people on a journey with, and actually we've got to probably do it quite quickly.
Yeah. So pace is obviously a factor, and I suppose what people would be pointing to is like, well, we've got to get quicker, but actually it's also getting more complex. So where do I do my thinking within that? Are you seeing that?
Yeah, hugely. In actual fact, one of my big personal drivers is where I see complexity is how can I reduce it significantly. So, how can we keep boiling down to the smallest essence? So when we see huge organisation problems, if we tackle them at that level, it's almost impossible. So kind of just but almost doing the 5 why exercise.
Yeah.
Why to get down to root cause analysis. And but I think once we're there, it's really important for the HR profession and for leadership actually to start looking at things from a slightly different angle rather than the way that we've done in the past. A bigger
And
trick, but it's a habit.
Yeah, that reminds me of how both the people profession and leaders have often kind of got a model and gone, look, there we go, that's what we can do. And it does feel like that's getting more difficult to do now, because it's almost like, well, that model was built based on knowledge, and this is about an emerging thing that hasn't translated yet into a model. So I've got nothing to hold on to, I've got nothing to frame it. So I'm guessing our usual tactics are now coming into question, and we're having to be a bit more creative, would you say?
Oh, hugely, Perry. I completely agree with that. And I think,
Yeah.
I'm a great believer in the shadow of the leader. Every
Right.
leader casts a shadow over the organization, and people tend to operate and dance within that. And I think,
Yeah.
certainly for the HR profession,
Yeah.
if we're going to create the change, I think we have to be the first movers on this if we're going to make
Right.
significant step change. I have to say, I
Yeah.
mean, I'm not saying that just because you're interviewing me today as part of this fabulous conversation, but some of the important work you're doing around changing the target operating model, and a big proponent of that. I'm
Thank you.
completely chasing your tails on that. I think it's really
Great.
important, seminal work. But
Thanks.
so too in terms of not just the operating model, but I think just our fundamental, some of the fundamental thinking around how we've organized the value that we drive in traditional HR buckets, I would say.
Yeah.
If we get this right, actually
Yeah.
others are going to follow across our
Yeah.
enterprise organizations.
Yeah, and I'm now interested, because I want to pull this thread with you about that whole HR as the first mover.
Yeah.
So I've got two kind of strands to that. One is, have you done that already? And so, talk to us about some of the work you've done where you felt like you're the first mover. And then I think give us your wish list. What else do you want to be the first mover on? Now, you can start wherever you want on that, stuff you've done or stuff you want to do. Where do you want to play?
Yeah, well, I think the stuff we've done. I mean, we moved, and it's not new news in HR terms now, but we moved to an agile way of working for global delivery of big global projects. That
Yeah.
was a significant step for us good number of years ago, and we are seeing
Right.
lots of parts of our business actually adopting that. Not just the
Great.
methodology, but the mindset around delivering MVP. How can we deliver minimal viable product, small pieces of incremental value, testing and learning quickly and regularly, in order to make sure that what I describe is we're relying less on the big bets and
Yeah.
instead placing lots of small ones across the organizations
Nice.
where we can learn and experiment.
Nice.
And
That sounds good.
I think the other area is just, and it's more a place where we're going to be evolving to very shortly, which is demolishing the talent life cycle. It's dead. It's dead. Talent acquisition, onboarding, performance management, or we call it performance engagement at Collinson,
Yep.
career development. That's such a linear way of
Yeah.
thinking about our people, and there's way more to our people than just those. I'll call them buckets. That's crude, but that's what I think those buckets are. Very crude. Our people can be at any one of those points, probably all of those points at any one given time. But the challenge with traditional labels is they're our go-to position every time we want to find a solution. So
Yeah.
I think alongside your target operating model work you're doing, I think there's some work to do around how we just demolish some of the structures in terms of the way that we think and operate across the HR profession. And you know
Yeah.
what? Let's play around with it, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. We can always
Yeah.
revert if that doesn't work. But we're not going to create the significant step change if we keep doing what we've always done.
No. So a bit of creative destruction, I guess I'm picking up from that, and
Yeah.
and with it, I think is a really really exciting thing for anybody listening to this podcast, but particularly in the people profession, which is about experimentation.
Oh, yeah.
And I think you are known as one of the experimenters. So
Thank
talk
you.
to us a bit more about your sort of leaning towards experiments and even some examples, because I think that's the key to unlocking this. Like you said, the small incremental pieces, the experiments.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I think the good thing about small bets and mini experiments is, when you fail, because you will fail, doesn't matter. You're not creating huge harm. But observing the value and the learnings that come from that is absolutely important. But if I think about, for example, the Ulrich, and Ulrich's done some fantastic work, and
Yeah.
he's really led the path, thankfully, for the HR profession over the years.
Yeah.
But the business partners, when I talk to my leadership team about the range of capabilities within the people and culture function, our leaders get really excited. And then when I talk about within their business partner that represents them, what their capabilities they look all deflated.
Oh.
Now we've got some fantastic, really, really strong business partners, but the world of HR is so broad and so deep. But business partners on the current trajectory, actually, it depends on their previous experiences or companies that they've worked in as to where their particular bent is. And that's why I think we're also experimenting a lot with strategic people planning at the moment, but doing it quite differently than what I've seen in the past, because I think there's a way that we can shift our model and raise the bar across our business partnering community to really drive more of an impact and truly be seen as a strategic, but also a very pragmatic business partner that's driving value and performance for each business area.
And I share your sort of agitation, shall we say, about that, because I've worked with business partners before who were ex-ER and they lean towards ER. I've worked with business partners who were L&D and they lean towards L&D. It's no slight on them, is it? Because that's been their bag, and now they're suddenly holding court on a whole range of strategic issues. But I think you're right. There's always been that little confusion from the business leaders on, so what are they here for? There's always been that question, right?
Yeah, and I think we're quite lucky at Collinson. So we've moved. I often say to new business partners coming in, the challenge you're going to have is not selling, but keeping up with the demand. So we've gone over that edge, which is great, and seen as true partners. But I'm now recognising, and so are my direct reports, an opportunity to raise the game even further. I mean, it's a nice position to be in. We're quite fortunate now, but we've worked really hard over the years to get to that point. But now we're seeing actually that's not taken the journey far enough.
Yeah, and you raise an interesting point there about capacity, because that, I think, is the thing that really does give me the sort of sense of chill, really, for the people profession, which is, have we enough capacity in the right ways for the things that we need to do? Those wicked problems, those huge issues, but breaking them down or otherwise, have we got the capacity to deal with those? Is that something you're working on in terms of making sure there is the right kind of capacity, we have the right kind of focus?
Do you know what, Perry? I think that's genuinely, that's a great question, because in traditional terms, no way. There is too much to do. I use that that way of thinking when I think about diversity and DEI, right?
Yeah.
Because there's just so much to do. We recognise already we're just not going to get there. So that for me echoes back to so if we know that, then something's got to change. If we want to really be delivering the kind of impact and value that our profession needs to, that again is another case for us reinventing the game, because we won't get there. And I think we have to start focusing much more, but not have to. I think there's benefit in experimenting with the concept of how can we instead of thinking about what HR needs. So we know we need talent reviews, we need succession planning. Again, these are all the traditional buckets that are driving me crazy. Of course they add value. That's why we've done them for so long. But we can't keep up on top of the BAU with the demands to be able to support, deliver, and enable our businesses. So we've got to recreate the puzzle, Perry. Simplify the puzzle, and then figure out a way that we can also use that to have a bit more fun with as well. I have to say, as a chief people officer, I do really serious work, but I want to enjoy what I'm doing, and I want my team to have fun doing brilliant things too.
And I love that, because the fun bit comes from the sense of achievement, making a difference, connecting with people, tackling those things that have previously been kind of like just pushed in the too hard space by others. And you picked on a really good example with DE&I and just the scale of it, like you say, and the complexity of it. But actually, rather than kind of going, oh, it's too hard, let's just do something token for now, it's like, let's grab something that's the first, almost like big thing but little in scale that we can do for people, and then it will snowball up. So I think there's something in there, isn't there, about that is a calling to you, not to say it's too hard and push it away, but go, how can I break it down? How can I do those mini experiments that you said?
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I've just hired a new head of D&I, DEI, global head, just joined us from Meta. So big win, and thanks, Meta.
Nice.
We appreciate your
Yay.
gift. But that doesn't mean that we can't experiment and do things much more differently, which we are about to do for sure.
Yeah. Excuse me. The other thing I'm thinking that you're making me go to here is this concept of ownership. Because, as you say, there are lots of problems. There are lots of experiments. But they need to have somebody who kind of owns that. I'm kind of feeling like somebody who say, look, I'm just going to hold the problem. I'm not going to drive through the solution. I'm just going to hold the problem so that you can come to it and start picking away and own bits of the solution. Is that something you're consciously aware of doing and seeing, that there's this kind of holding and attacking kind of philosophy?
Yeah, do you know what? So the thing with, we're all accountable to a boss in some way, and I report to my two CEOs, and so whilst the concept of experimentation sounds great and easy, ultimately my CEOs want to know, what's the value you're driving? What's the difference you and your team are making to my business? But the thing with experimentation is that you know, like lighting a fire. I call it like lighting lots of little fires. What you don't want to do is put big logs on straight away, because you're going to put the fire out. It's about putting small twigs and whatever there's probably a proper name for it.
Kindling.
Kindling. There you go. Kindling. And giving it the breathing space, the oxygen to be able to work. And so I think the beauty of small experiments is you're not applying huge amounts of resources, whether that's financial or people, in order to be able to make that work. What you're generally doing is driving through good effort, passion, general points of interest to be able to define those value points and opportunities. But whatever you do on those, resist at all costs chucking big pieces of wood on, which in real terms for me is, where's the KPIs, where's the results, where's the return on value? Do not do it.
Yeah. And the fire metaphor we can go a long way with. I absolutely agree with you, because you've got the inner fire of people. You've got the right combination, as you said, of something that's combustible and the oxygen that's needed for it. And often, using oxygen as a metaphor, we try and do so much. We are literally squeezing the breathing out of what we're doing, right?
Yeah. You know, the pressure's on for HR teams, right? You know, do more. We need you to support us. We're going through pain. We need to grow up. You know, Collinson's a great example. We've just broken through and starting to have fantastic business performance again after a really, really long period of pain. But we've also got at some point the thinking around, you know, are we going to become we're about 1,750 people. Are we going to remain a big small company, or are we about to become a small big company? And actually, the implications of that transition are really, really significant, Perry.
Yeah. And they talk to a lot of the culture things that I guess you're very obsessed about.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I had a conversation with Joe from HR Magazine recently about the concept of hyper-personalization of employee experience. And so I think there's a lot which sounds sexy, but actually there's some real meat on the bone in terms of what that actually looks like. But we have to stop thinking about our people as employees, because actually, you know, you and I have talked in the past, Perry, about this idea of a human-centric organization, which to some sounds very kind of tree huggy, I guess, but there's a lot to unpick there, whether that's around authenticity of our leadership teams in being able to create genuine connections and motivation, right through to actually, if you thought, we throw all this stuff as organizations into our culture, to whether it's a beer fridge or it's a some communications events, whatever it might be. But what are the 4 things, for example, Perry, that when your people come when they come into your office every day or they turn up for work, what are the 4 things that are really consuming their minds, like that are weighing them down, be it relationship issues, health and well-being, their financial status? Because you can do all the other stuff, but you're putting plaster over a big wound. you start to address some of that and find a way to connect with people, you all of a sudden, you go beyond engagement into what I would describe as loyalty. It's very different.
And that's a lovely word, isn't it, loyalty? Because it feels like it is not an imposed situation at all. It is people discovering loyalty and being loyal rather than a kind of an urge or an insistence. Because it's like, you can't insist on loyalty because what you're doing there is ascribing to me or forcing me. But if I'm loyal, this is what it looks like. And then there is that reciprocation, isn't there, about the loyalty back.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think actually where we're going to be shifting to, Perry, and we will be shifting there, and it's already happening, is treating our people. Some people call them employees, but I've used that term a couple of times just intentionally here. But they're already people. Why give them a different name? But treating our people more like customers, and that they have a choice whether to buy from us or to go somewhere else. And that's why loyalty rather than engagement is really, really so important. And I think becoming more customer consumer centric in terms of what we do, how we deliver value to the experience that we provide our people is going to be more and more of an increasing focus, particularly with the the power and benefit of things like generative AI, for example, and beyond that into the more human centered approaches that we can adopt.
And just to think about Collinson as an organisation, you have people in a number of different roles that you would call kind of screen-based administrative experts and people who are in front-facing and customer and all. So you've got a real different makeup. And so I'm guessing that some of the work you do is to help people in their own space realise what loyalty can give them, I suppose.
Yeah, well, I happen to work for one of the global leaders in loyalty and benefits. So we work with I think it's around 600 banks, including like Amex, MasterCard, Visa, Chase, etc. So we do this stuff externally.
Yeah.
So I'm like, from my perspective or from my team's perspective, it's like, well, this is how we should be doing it internally too. And it really does shift. If you start to think about solutions from the customer's perspective, in this case, it's our people. If you start from that place, which is very much goes back to the agile methodology and way of thinking, as you all know, product or design thinking. I think there's a really nice mesh actually that we're heading towards, where design thinking and systems thinking really come together beautifully to help actually give us a very clear framework for how we make this evolution as a profession.
Yeah. I love that you've introduced those two with the thinking at the suffix to it, because I love design thinking and I love systems thinking. They fascinate the hell out of me. So people listening to this, go onto a generative AI platform or go and do a bit of Google searching on both of those two, because you and I both know, Bertie, they are little treasure troves, aren't they, of things that you can start to deploy.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I mean, you just open that box and there's a range of stuff in there that's going to enlighten people, that's going to get tools, frameworks. I mean, there's some beautiful stuff out there, and actually a lot of it's not even that new. It's just we've forgotten about it because new trends evolve within our profession and things move on. But there's some really great stuff out there that we've almost forgotten, and it feels like in some degree now's the time to bring them back out.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. And when you talked about the buckets earlier on, it is almost like, no, we're talking about a luxury case here full of goodies. So the bucket can stay where it is and have a look at that, because you're right, there's a sort of Renaissance thinking thing going on there. Because I think they were designed around about the time that we were post-war, heavy industrial.
Yeah,
and I'm guessing people were starting to think, hang on a minute, this is all a bit mechanistic. Surely it's more than that. And they did this thinking. And you're right, it kind of got underutilised. But this human-centred that you're talking about, I think brings it back out to life. Hey there, it's Perry Timms, host of Tomorrow's People. Let's talk about HR solutions. From hiring to payroll, an all-in-one solution is simply better for business. A solution like Personio covers each stage of that all-important employee lifecycle. Upgrade your HR work today at personio.com. That's PERSONIO.com. Now, I know at Collinson you've been doing a lot to amplify the nature of humans in your teams? Because you've got campaigns and videos and all sorts of things. So what was
Yeah.
the spark behind that?
Yeah, I mean, we did a campaign, as you said, we did what we called it, I guess, a branding campaign, which was all
Yeah.
based around a video. And what we wanted to do was, at Collinson, it's a culture where everyone cares. I had an interesting conversation with our CEO of our insurance division this morning. It was just like, do you know what? We were just talking openly. This is an organisation where people care. And you can absolutely expect people to operate within our values and operate ethically, even though we don't push that stuff out, rarely push that
Yeah.
stuff through. We don't force feed people. It's people know when they come in. And so I think the real impetus really for us doing a lot of work to help start telling the Collinson story is actually, work can be really tough in our business, like every other business. So don't be fooled, anyone, if you're listening, to think that we've got it all good and we're getting a chance to just flounce around doing little experiments. It's tough. It can be really draining and upsetting, and like your job, anyone that's listening. So what I am seeing actually is, the need to really start telling our story, because it's something special to tell, not just internally but externally, and that is not a story about logic. It's not come here and you can build a successful career. It's come and be part of something that will care about you deeply. And in doing so, I can pretty much guarantee that you're going to care right back. So I think the systems and design thinking elements that we're talking about, I think why that's so important, that there's this renaissance, as you describe it now, is because now we have purpose. And we've got this purpose driven piece now, which comes together and connect. And I think that was potentially the big missing piece around ESG, for example. And, I think there's a really nice intersection now, because the maturity of the world's business thinking has come so far that there's a nice point of intersectionality now between these elements, which means we can start to get back to doing really meaningful work. So in short, I realise that whilst there's a lot we're not getting right at Collinson, certainly within the people and culture function, there's a heck of a lot to be proud of. And I would urge all of your listeners today to focus a little bit more on that stuff too, Be proud of the things that you're doing. Talk about it. Life's tough. Recognise where you're making those wins, however small they might be.
And that's a lovely point, actually, because I guess when we read something like the Gallup engagement survey for 23, it's easy to get despondent because it's down at like 10% engaged in the UK or something, which is like, are you serious? 90% of us are either ambivalent or really detest or hate what we do. I mean, that's such a sad indictment. However, what we are, I guess, starting to think now is, the way you get better is you look at where you're already pretty good and then build up off that. So you've got some kind of stability, right? It's not just completely and utterly rebuild. But I love the thought of the blow up creative destruction thing that you talked about in like contained environments.
Yeah, I mean, look, so we work with a company called Impulse who specialise in actually measuring emotions. So they really hone in on how you measure emotions, which has been fantastic for us. Our engagement results at Collinson are at 76%. So now part of that is because we really try to focus on the whole person, not, I'll use the word again, not the employee. So and we've got lots of incredible stories where we've been there for people in their darkest hour, Perry, and we don't need to tell those stories because fortunately they gain traction themselves, and people come and they hear these things, these if anyone's ever done anything around the culture web, fantastic little framework if ever you think about translating strategy into culture, but the kind of the stories, the rituals and patterns, etc., that we adopt really help us to get these things out there without us really without it seeming ugly, and the need for us to over promote the fact that, hey, we've just done this good deed, look what we've done for somebody, because I think that's a little bit crass. You're better off your customers or your people talking about that themselves.
Yeah, I think there's something about the authenticity of that, isn't there? And I guess what we're looking for in the world of work sometimes is a genuine sense of sincerity, so that people can feel that what the organisation stands for is sincere, like purpose that you
Yeah,
talked about,
yeah,
and that the exchange between you, your colleagues, your leaders, the whole organisation is a sincere exchange as well. It's well intended. It's got positive aspirations to it.
yeah,
So yeah,
definitely.
that's a nice thought. I'm thinking about your role in sort of leading others, specifically at the moment, and you talked about the leader shadow earlier on, which is nice because that's a phrase I also use. What's it feel like when you are a pioneering leader and you've got to really sort of instill that sense of excitement in people if it's not quite yet there yet, if they're a bit uncertain, or if they're a bit like, I think Bertie's off on one, what are we going to do? I mean, how do you manage that sort of energy and get people really sort of fired up with you?
That's really great question. Actually, I quite often in my one-to-ones with my direct reports I say, what am I doing wrong? And they hate it because we get on generally. I think we seem to get on. We have great relationships, and they're like, well, nothing wrong. I don't want to like. And I'm like, no, that's not good enough. What am I doing wrong? That would mean that I
Right.
could be a better leader. And one of the pieces of feedback that's come through quite a lot has been, we love your energy. We ride on the coattails of it. It's brilliant. Sometimes just look in the rear view mirror a little bit longer than you perhaps think you should, because
What a nice phrase.
it's lovely. Yeah, I think as I could swear here, which is probably what they were wanting to do, but I thought it was very well placed. And quite often they'll say, Bertie, we don't want you to get involved down here. We want you to
Okay.
focus where you add the most value and where you get most energized by, because actually that's the stuff that we look to for hope and aspiration, which is quite nice, I
That's nice.
guess.
And it feels like it's a co-constructed deal then, isn't it? It's not like you saying, I'm going to be responsible for my own shortcomings. It's almost like I need you to help me appreciate where I might not get it right.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we have to be willing, really willing. I talk about this a lot, about the need to be uh, humble and vulnerable where we
Yeah,
can.
nice.
But it's different. It's a difficult balance, being humble and vulnerable, because you also need to be. I think as a leader, it's also beneficial to be sure of yourself and to be confident. And so there's a balancing act to be had there. And I think so the constant check-ins and using your own teams or those people that you have um, relationships with at work to create that balance is useful. And I would say not just the people that you get on with; they'll place huge value on that conversation as well.
Yeah. And that talks to something that I'm seeing a lot more of, and particularly perhaps in a slightly more remote hybrid world, which is
Mm.
where people are saying it's really difficult to do the feedback thing if I've got to be a little bit critical, or I've got to pick somebody up, or so I don't know if that's something that you're paying a lot of attention to at Collinson, how people feed back to each other and create this sense of interplay with each other.
Yeah, so we call it either courageous conversations is where what we quite often call it, or I call it healthy challenge. And it's funny,
Yeah.
you kind of you encourage people to provide healthy challenge rather than feedback, and all of a sudden it looks and feels more therapeutic.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So if I'm in a room and I see leaders or managers, and they're having conversations and everyone's being really nice, I'm like, come on, if you were to provide some healthy challenge to this, to what John or Sandra's just said, well, yeah, man, let's do it. See what else we could kick up. Let's make sure that we're going down the right path. And for every decision that we make, the other thing that I'm doing quite a lot of, and so are my team, is when we're at a point where we're trying to drive decisions, or teams are driving decisions, is to
Yeah.
say, why might this be the wrong decision, and to critique the crap out of it to make sure that we're testing it. Unfortunately, the concept of groupthink is still very prevalent. We still
Yeah.
go down that road. It's still,
Yeah.
the quiet people might disagree after the event, after the meeting, or
Yeah.
the introverted may
Yeah.
be still processing their thoughts, while the extroverted preferences are driving ahead and the decision's made. So putting those points in where you critique, evaluate, and really pull apart why that decision might be the wrong one is also a valuable exercise. And I think what it does do, Perry, is builds a bit of a feedback, a challenge
Yeah.
muscle. And I found
Yeah.
myself, the more I've done it, the more comfortable you are. Like I don't find it uncomfortable telling someone they're going to, I'm going to have to let them go. I
Yeah.
don't find
Yeah.
that difficult because I know that I would have had the right conversations many, many times
Yeah.
before, because
Yeah.
I've got into that habit of making it where it feels easy.
And that's how we do all of this kind of habit forming thing anyway, don't we? And change the way we are. So we might have the urge to do it, but we just might not feel very good at it. So we tend to resist it. But the more we practice it and the more it becomes normalized, we quite literally can just roll it out, can't we, as a thing. So I like the muscle analogy there. There is a kind of workout to be done here to get yourself feedback fit type thing.
Yeah, every week, every day, or every week. It's even the smallest of things. There's a famous book called Eat That Frog. It's very old, time management book, and the concept with the Eat That Frog book was you've got an ugly frog, which is the ugliest task to do. Imagine if, and every day you tend to leave that till the end of the day, and at the end of the day you have to eat this ugly frog. Imagine if the first thing you did every day was to eat the ugliest frog that you had. Everything else that you eat that day, every problem you consume, can only get better. It's an oldie but a goodie.
Other non-animal foodstuffs are available, of course. But,
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
I totally get you. Now it would probably be called Eat That Quinoa or something.
Love it.
I want to loop back to experiments. You got me now, because I think there's something in the feedback muscle that actually, if you're doing an experiment, oh my goodness me, you cannot do an experiment without feedback, right? The whole point of it is to reveal stuff that you talk about and you synthesize and you kick around and you go, why did that happen? What can we do about that? And how do we tinker and create a next version? So I'm guessing your passion for it and zest for it has infiltrated the organization, and you are an experimental place to be.
Yeah, I mean we're already way before I joined. We were an entrepreneurial company, but when but the company's grown so much, and we're across, we're very much global, highly complex. So I think it was already in the spirit of the organization. I think part of my job is to make sure that the embodiment of all things people and culture, which my team are the guardian of, to be clear, not the owner, the guardian. The owners are every single person that walks over our threshold every day. But we're the guardians of providing the frameworks, the principles, the practices, the psychological nudges that mean that people stay within the right kind of essence of what it means to be Collinson.
Yeah, nice. And that entrepreneurial spirit and experimentation means you are revealing lots of evidence about what works and stuff, because I know evidence-based practice is big in our field, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. It really is. And while we're talking about experimentation, let's not forget the importance of doing the brilliant basics, because and we've had some stark reminders of the need while we're doing really cool, interesting, good, meaningful stuff. We every now and again we're like, oh gosh, blimey, we've let that go, and it's the importance for us of doing the brilliant basics should never ever be forgotten either.
Yeah, because that sort of gives it a strength, like a girdering and all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And your sort of wishes and hopes for people profession and HR and just the whole sense of work. I mean, we've had conversations like this along a number of different lines, but are things starting to form about certainty and like real drive towards and stuff? What's kind of in the Bertie's head of the future kind of reveal?
Well, I think a rebirth of the HR profession. Let's go drastic.
Yeah.
I mean, let's look at what we do. And let's reimagine the world of work. And we are the ones that are going to shape and drive that. Our leaders do look to us. Even those people that might be sitting there as a standalone with a very small team in a big organisation who feel undervalued, because we've got lots of those. We're all in different places in our profession, the organisations that we are and the careers that we're stages that we're at. But I think a reimagining of the of the world of work, most certainly, and that's already starting. It's going to happen. Whether we want to be part of it or not is happening.
That's true.
I think a rebirth of the HR profession, Whether that, again, we talked about operating model, we talked about
Yeah.
looking at traditional labels and buckets that we've
Yeah.
assigned that are in need of a drastic transformation. But I also think actually the role of the role of the profession itself, the role that we play, is more customer centric actually, which is again we did touch on a little bit, and less where we are today, which is, I guess, either considered a supportive or an enabling function.
Yeah, I like all of those because they do play into each other, and one fuels strength in the other and sparks all sorts of other things. But I think you're right about that final point, isn't it? Which is like, we have probably been either comfortable or slightly frustrated by being this support or enabling function, not quite at the vanguard enough. But my sense is this complexity we talked about, this uncertainty in leaders, is that it's just that you're sat in front of three doors. It's like the biggest wide door open for us to step into that we've probably ever seen, right?
Yeah. Everyone's ready for it. Everyone's ready for it, but people are looking around for someone to take the first step and lead the charge. So I don't know about you. Well, I do know about you, Perry. We want to be the first ones through. I don't want to be following.
Yeah.
I don't want to be following once our leadership team has charged through. I want to be the one that takes the first brave steps and leads them through it.
And there's probably a sort of a kind of closing thought message there, which is if people are feeling this and are starting to listen to this going, it sounds a bit like something I've been thinking about, but I haven't really entertained and pushed to the front of my mind. I think we're saying, no, do that. Let it out. Be that bold, adventurous, pioneering, daring, aggregating force. Because actually you and I would probably testify that's where the fun really starts to come in.
Oh, it does, Perry. It does. It absolutely does. And look, I often talk about, get your head out of the sand and start learning a lot about what neuroscience is telling us, right? Around the psychology and physiology of performance, and starting to align. There's some fantastic TED Talks out there around this sort of stuff. There's the work of David Rock, great neuroscientist. There's some really incredible thinking and research and evidence around the biology and psychology of performance, which I think is also really worth us thinking about as we start to blend our purpose-driven, high-performing organisations. I was on a conversation yesterday with someone from Professor Carroll from Cranfield, I think it was, where we were talking about. Actually, she's just won the HR's Most Influential Thinker. And we were in a conversation yesterday around the need to actually build much better bridges between academic and practitioner worlds. And I know the academic world are really keen to do that, but it's going to take practitioners to lean in too. At times, we often talk, it feels like, in a very different language. But there's an emergence, I think, which could be quite transformative.
And I think what you started with about complexity in the world, and that's the common ground now, because academia is like, well, I haven't got any precedence for this, so I'm going to have to work with you to get the evidence for me to model it and then theorize and then teach it. So I think you're right. There's a sort of almost like a new sense of discovery that could come that brings those previously slightly marginalized and tricky relationships with others completely off the table now. It's just like we're all in this together. We are quite literally, in my mind, I'm having some kind of festival scenario. It's like there's no rules here. We just got to dance to whatever's coming through. So the Glastonbury for people professionals kind of popped in my head there.
And
look forward to that.
And as much as we want structure, as much as we need structure to deliver the kind of value that we're aiming for here, we have to break out of the linear mindsets that we've got around our people, our organizations, around our structures, around our hierarchies. Because value doesn't flow through a linear process anymore. It's gone. So one of the things we're looking at the moment is building personas, like you would do with a customer, as you're building products, for example, around what are our people personas, and starting to think about things more, trying to again boil things down to the smallest essence and create greater simplification as we aim to drive value.
Yeah, and bring that human factor in through those exemplars of, right? There's something in that, and I love that fact that we, you mentioned hyper personalization. Either we are not leaning so far towards employees it's becoming like a adult playpen. We are saying there's serious work to be done here, but because it's serious, we need to look after you. We need to know what's going to get the best from you, and we make this exchange, and that's where the formula starts to work. So I love that.
And one of my biggest inspirations in the world has been Bruce Lee. Okay, and he still is. He's apart from being a badass, as we all know. But one of his famous sayings was, notice that the stiffest tree is the one that's easily cracked. Whereas if you're a willow or bamboo, you'll just blow in the wind no matter how fierce the wind or the force against you. And I think that there's something there for us in the HR profession is. We've got to be much less rigid than we are. We've got to reimagine and push ourselves to be different.
Bit of kung fu HR I'm hearing there.
Love it.
and I still wonder whether when Craig Douglas recorded that song, was everybody kung fu fighting? He said they were.
Well, I certainly was. Put it that way, Perry, and with a big hat on. So.
Nice. Well, yes, I'm glad you've been the cat in the hat. Bertie, anything else from you before we sign off from what's been a fascinating ramble through all sorts of things?
Well, just to say, I've got a few inspirations in my professional career, apart from people like Bruce Lee and David Rock, etc. But you're certainly one of them, Perry. I think you're. I hope this stays in the clip, but you're doing some great work at progressing our profession, and thank you. There's people like Kevin Green who. Is a CEO for First Group, doing some fantastic work kind of under the radar. So I think just, when you spot somebody, when any of your listeners identify people or come across a podcast where you think, oh, that's interesting, follow their work. Make it your goal to look at if they've got YouTube clips, podcasts, if they're speaking at a conference. And, if they've already piqued your interest, follow them, understand what else they're saying, because it's likely you're going to get some real sources of inspiration. But inspiration on itself is worthless if us as a profession, you as listeners, aren't taking that and thinking, what am I going to do with this today?
Nice. And I think there's lots that people are going to do after they've listened to you, because you've given them all sorts of stuff. Yeah, it's been like a masterclass in progressive, alternative and absolutely powerful people practice. So on that strength,
thank you.
Thank you, Bertie. Thank you for such a wonderful display of all the things that make us proud to be in this profession. So thank you, man.
Super good. Thanks, Perry. Take care.
If you've enjoyed this episode of Tomorrow's People, please subscribe and check out our previous episodes from wherever you get your podcasts from. And if you want to transform your people processes, head to personio.com.